And then I want to briefly address the situations of the unaccompanied minors at Glass House, just really clarify what that term means.
On August 19th of 2024, the Office of Inspector General and the Department of Homeland Security released a report that stated HHS had taken custody of over 448,820 UACs. UAC stands for Unaccompanied Alien Child. These are children that arrive at the U.S. border without a parent. As of August 24th, 2024, HHS is openly admitted to losing 323,000 children.
At MyCOP, we run a program called Opportunities for Youth, which provides case management, mentoring, legal navigation for youth and their sponsors involved in legal proceedings. Currently, we are serving 30 youth in Ventura County with the unaccompanied minor status. Unfortunately, 5 of these youth have voluntarily returned to their home countries out of fear. 1 family in our OFY program, 3 unaccompanied minors and their mother.
UAC stands for Unaccompanied Alien Child. These are children that arrive at the U.S. border without a parent.
Lost their primary provider during the July 10th raid. Overnight, they were left without income, stability, or the ability to navigate a complex legal process on their own. It was reported at Glass House that 11 minors were working at the company, and none of these minors were part of our program. We also learned that these minors have been mistreated while in custody.
What did DHS, HHS, and ORR do to correct this humanitarian disaster? Nothing. In fact, all 3 agencies created further policies and procedures to increase the efficiency of moving UACs from the border to the interior of the United States to unknown and unvetted sponsors. Unaccompanied alien children were being handed off to total strangers.
They are now in the process of applying for legal status and are currently being detained at ORR shelters in Los Angeles. They have their own caseworkers and legal representation. However, the harsh reality is that when they turn 18, if their paperwork is not complete, they become eligible for deportation themselves.
President Trump was doing DNA testing, which isn't happening anymore. And they're just handing kids off and they're not really following up with where they've gone or anything else.
We've seen, though, on the ground, there was a particular situation in Florida where you had these Guatemalan illegal aliens that were using this network of houses to try to sponsor kids. So, if you try to send 13 kids to one address, that's going to raise some red flags, despite how crappy the vetting procedures are at ORR, that's the Office of Refugee Resettlement, it's a subdivision of the Department of Health and Human Services. Despite how shady their vetting procedures are, it would probably still raise a flag if you saw all these kids going to one address. What these Guatemalan illegals were doing was they used a network of houses to attempt to sponsor these kids. From the documents we had, this particular couple attempted to sponsor at least 13 kids across this network of 5 houses. Now, at these houses, there were also other illegal aliens who were sponsoring children. And we found a couple of kids who were delivered to this network and interviewed them. And what we were told was that, basically kids are coming in. They're brought in as young as 5 years old is what we were told. They're told, okay, well, tomorrow you're going to go to work. We got a job lined up for you. What we were told was that there is a debt, or at least the children we spoke to, there was a debt held over their head, and it's been held over their head for years.
To add to that, because the issue of the minor youth became sort of the reason of why there was that alleged warrant for the Glass House Farm. And we have this information directly from the organization that is representing all of those youth.
We must prevent children from being lost into slave labor, commercial sex, organ harvesting, and other unspeakable evils.
What they are saying is that one of those youth turned 18, was released, and has now been reunified with his partner and baby in Mexico. The partner was over 18 and also detained at Glass House Farm. These were not unaccompanied youth, but she immediately took a deportation because she needed to be with her infant. The remaining children are being represented Immigrant Defenders Law Center. Unfortunately, ORR has heightened requirements for ORR sponsorship.
I got invited to meet with the president of Honduras. The next day, I flew to Guatemala and met with the president of Guatemala. Your open border policies are killing our children. Your open border policies are incentivizing traffickers to come into our countries, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, even as south as Colombia and Ecuador, working with them. They're seeing an increase of kidnapping of their children, and they know why. They're easily being delivered, in large part, to Biden and his horrific, demonic policies. Their children are being disappeared and trafficked and raped and put into slave labor, organ harvesting, thanks to these open border policies. So it's not even political when you get south of the border. It's just a humanitarian situation. And these open border policies will go down in history as the worst policies since 1850 with the Fugitive Slave Act.
So none of the others have been released to family members.
If we take 3 of those stadiums and we set them side by side, this will give you a great visualization of what 323,000 missing children would look like.
At least not yet. All of them remain in ORR foster care placements, which is still immigration detention. So if you're wondering where all of those youth are, they were not rescued for child trafficking. They are in detention center as of now. Also, ORR subcontracted case managers are required to submit OTIP request within 24 hours of identifying a child who was potentially a victim of trafficking.
I spoke with a care provider in Florida who told me about cases of migrant children as young as 8 with sexually transmitted diseases. Child trafficking has evolved into an international syndicate of gangs and cartels. It's highly organized and efficient. It mirrors the tactics and operations of terrorist organizations. Smugglers and traffickers have moved more than 500,000 children. They flooded across our borders, and we have delivered them to criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations who are using the UC program as a white glove delivery service of children.
They can get that information from Department of Homeland Security or the children themselves. However, they have not issued OTIP letters for these kids. And if they have information on trafficking, it would be extremely helpful for the legal team and their attorneys, since it would help make them eligible for T visas. But as of yet, no such information has been shared, and they have not been given the benefits usually afforded to victims of trafficking.
HHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, as the head of the Department of Homeland Security, he oversees border security and immigration enforcement, which directly impacts the intake and initial processing of UACs. Next, we have HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra. The Department of Health and Human Services under Becerra takes custody of UACs once they cross the border. HHS, through its Office of Refugee Resettlement, is responsible for the care, placement, and eventual release of these children. Next, we have ORR Director Robin Marcos. As the Director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Marcos oversees the welfare and placement of these children in the U.S., including ensuring they are placed in safe environments. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, led by Marcos, is central to this crisis. Allegations against these officials suggest systemic failures, criminal neglect, trafficking of children across state lines, child endangerment, and crimes against humanity.
If the federal government has trafficking concerns, the children should be treated as victims in need of services and support, not subjected to prolonged federal detention and deportation. Another concern is that if some of these children decide to stay behind in those detention centers and fight their case, they're looking at years before they're able to get any potential remedy. So in the meantime, all of those children that we're referring to that were rescued from Glass House Farm are going to be in detention center. That is what they were rescued from being with their parents, with their community, and now put in a detention center. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. But this was a direct message from the attorney team that has been representing all of the minor youth that were apprehended at the Glass House Farm.